And I'll keep letting folks in from the waiting room, but I just, since we only have a half hour here, we might as well get started. So, hi, everybody. I'm very happy to introduce Tom Akin. Some of you who have been through MUG or other workshops with us will know Tom and his soil expertise. But either way, we are very happy to have Tom here. Tom's a very knowledgeable soil scientist, works for the USDA, but also has done a lot of community and home gardening. So is in a great position to speak to you all about how to test and interpret your results from soil testing and how to build super healthy soil in your garden. Well, I'll pass it over, Tom.
Great. Hi, everyone. As Michelle said, my name is Tom Akin. I work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I am an agronomist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to
not get a remote
screen. I'm just going to pull up a.
Yeah, I think you had it. You were looking at
That
it.
was a packet of other things. That was the plumbing hose. And
So I was just going to, since we only have half an hour, I'm going to open it up for questions right off the bat, because, and I guess if no one has any questions that are burning, I'm just going to go quickly down to a couple examples of soil test results that I've received in the not too distant past from gardeners saying, here's my soil test, what should I do? So I guess the first thing, just gonna hit present here. First thing I always talk to gardeners about is, like one of the biggest things that you can fix, or the easiest things that can go wrong, is not having the correct soil pH. And soil pH really determines the solubility of nutrients. Excuse me, because if the nutrients are not dissolved in water, there's no way that the plant can actually absorb them. So the pH for garden soils that we're really shooting 6 and 7, because that's where most of the highest solubility for the nutrients are. And also, it also makes the heavy metals less soluble. So that's really important for soil contaminants like lead, and aluminum isn't really a contaminant, but it's toxic to plants. And as you see, aluminum toxicity is really affecting roots that are in acidic soil pHs. So for example, these are barley roots, which would be similar to garden plants that you would have in your garden. And when the pH gets really, really low, aluminum becomes soluble and is toxic to root systems and essentially stunts roots. So the one thing we have to keep in mind is that, like I said, for these nutrients to get into, to be absorbed by the root hairs, is that those nutrients need to come into this little film of water between the soil particles and the organic matter, and essentially be dissolved into water so that the plants can take them up. So this is one of the soil tests that I've gotten back just recently. And you can see the soil pH is 6.5, which is really good. The phosphorus level is super high. I see this a lot in community gardens. Gardeners tend to over fertilize with compost, and they usually use compost that are derived from animal manures, and animal manures contain a lot of phosphorus, and soils really don't need that much. Most vegetable crops are only going to remove a couple pounds of phosphorus per acre. So you can imagine on a small community garden plot where you're not harvesting tons of produce, phosphorus is going to build up. And it's not really an issue in Boston because phosphorus is considered a contaminant and a danger to water quality. But since most community gardens are not near surface waters, it's not really that big of a deal. But the problem is that soluble phosphorus can leave the landscape, and it's just not good for fresh water. It causes algae blooms and you know, all kinds of nasty cyanobacteria that are in freshwater bodies can just explode when they're exposed to high levels of phosphorus. But the other thing that I like to focus on are these base saturation numbers over here on the right. This is a really good guide here. These are the optimum ranges for the calcium, magnesium, and potassium. So my recommendation to this gardener was that, you know, everything is pretty good for this potassium number. And even though the potassium number down here, it says it's low to optimum, it is only 1% saturation. So that means that there's an awful lot of exchange sites where potassium, if I go back to this, there's an awful lot of exchange sites here where potassium could be attaching itself to these negative sites for it to go into solution, then to enter the plant. So this section in here is that base saturation zone where we'd like to see anywhere from 80 to 90% of the exchange sites are occupied with calcium, magnesium, and potassium. We really don't want to see the exchange sites occupied with aluminum and hydrogen, because those are the acidic, which they're not plant nutrients, and like I said, they can be detrimental to root health. So this garden really only needs an application of potassium to correct the fertility imbalance. One other thing that I wanted to point out is, remember when I said pH is really important, 6.5. The 6.5 pH is keeping this lead level at a very low level. And if this pH were down in the 4s, this lead level would be much higher. So if you have lead in your soil, or if you garden anywhere near urban, guarantee you there's going to be some type of lead, or lead from either lead paint, or even from deposition of lead gasoline in the 20th century. So keeping that soil pH high is really important, or 6 to 7 is really ideal. That's where we're going to minimize our heavy metal issues. So the other great thing about UMass soil tests is that they tell you exactly what you're supposed to do with the results. And there are all kinds of great websites from UMass that provide guidance for soil amendments. This was a mixed garden. I think it was just like garden vegetables, and so you tell the soil lab what you want to grow, and they provide the soil recommendations that will complement that. So, and here is your recommendation of 1/4 pound of potassium per 100 square feet. So if you are doing, say, like 1,000 square feet, which is probably a little closer to the size of a community garden bed, or maybe even 7,000 square feet, it's going to be 2.5 pounds of potassium per 1,000 square feet. And you can see the phosphorus level, as I mentioned, was super high. So you're getting a 0 recommendation there. And for pH, you're also getting a 0 recommendation. The pH is in the right zone. It's like spot on at 6.5. And the one thing that you will not receive from your soil test results is there will not be any nitrogen recommendations. I'm sorry, nitrogen readings on your test. The nitrogen recommendations are based on what you're growing. And so most crops are going to need this 2.5 to 3 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. This, once again, this is per 100 square feet. So we're just adding a 0 and moving the decimal place over. That 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet is pretty universal for crops. And it will be on the high end for the high feeders. So like when I mean high feeders, it's like corn and pumpkins and tomatoes and peppers. They're going to be on the high side. Greens are going to be on the low side. Even turf grass is going to be somewhere between 2 and 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet, depending on how you're managing the clippings. If you're putting the clippings back into the soil, you only need 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet for the entire year. If you're a golf course and you're removing those clippings, or if you have an area of lawn that you really want to be manicured and you are removing the clips where you need to provide that higher level of nitrogen. So this is another soil test that I received just recently from a gardener on Cape Cod. Now, the one thing that I always recommend folks pay for when they ask for a soil test is to get an organic matter level reading, because the organic matter levels are going to tell you a lot about your soil's nutrient holding capacity. So for example, this, let's just go back to where I started with the first test. This, once again, the soil pH is really good. The phosphorus levels here are in the optimum range. They're like between 4 and 14. They're not off the charts. And when I go over to look at these base saturation numbers, these are also kind of right where I want to see them. You know, like they're pretty much perfect, because once again, pH is my number one concern. I'm sorry, was there a question?
Actually,
and if anyone does have a question, please feel free to go ahead, Michelle.
Sure, that was someone who I think just hadn't muted themselves, but we do have a few questions if now is a good time.
Sure, let's take them now.
Okay, so Sarah, who is a coordinator at a large community garden, is wondering, is there any place to order a large quantity of soil tests for our large community garden, rather than sending them in one by one?
Mm-hmm.
That's one question. Do you want me to do you want to answer that, or should I keep?
Well, for community gardens, it's the one thing I always recommend when folks are taking soil tests is that they should think about how the gardens have been managed. So if individuals have managed the gardens differently, by, like some gardens bringing in lots of compost, other folks not bringing in anything. If you mix subsamples, you're going to get some funky results. So I would try to, so perhaps if you have someone who, if you have a garden with lots of plots, if you pick one that is representative of the management of most gardeners and sample that, and then maybe you do 2 or 3 different plots of soils, plots like that. So yeah, because I do understand these are not cheap. They are, when you throw in organic matter, soil tests are now over $25, I think. I think a regular test is 21, and then I think you add $5 for the organic matter. And for a community garden, if it is being managed relatively similarly, you probably could get away with just 2 or 3 tests and call it good. So I would, once again, I would shoot for selecting plots that are managed the same, because that will give you your best results. What's your next question, Michelle?
Great. Let's see. Someone is wondering if there is, is there a quick test that's somewhat informative? Usually I know there are all of those like hardware store tests that are not so reliable. Do you have any suggestions for anything?
No, unfortunately, your best tests are going to be tests from the university soil labs. It really, I mean, the one thing that I should caution folks is that you don't have to test every year. You only have to test every 3 to 5 years. And the best thing about having the soil test is that it really confirms that you're moving in the right direction. So it's always great to get a soil test when you're first starting out. When I first started community gardening at the Southwest Boston Community Garden on Cummins Highway, down, it's right along the T tracks. I tested my plots and the soil pHs were all over 7. These nutrient bars down here were all off the chart. Everything was above optimum. So then I knew that, it's like, I don't have to do anything. It's like, actually I did have to provide some potassium because this number was super low in comparison to the calcium and magnesium. So it helped me correct the nutrient balance. And the reason I harp on potassium so much is that potassium is responsible for moving water through the plant. And the water is what contains all the nutrients. So if potassium is deficient in your soil, it's not going to, the plant is just not going to be primed to move water easily and quickly through the plant. So potassium is huge for it's the stomata in leaves are controlled by potassium levels. So the whole gas exchange, and so plants are not going to wilt as easily if potassium levels are good. So yeah, I know, like I said, tests can be expensive, but it's really it's a good investment. Just going to go down to some of the amendment rates that I usually.
We actually have a couple more. Do you mind if we continue with our Q&A?
Please.
So 2 questions. One is wondering the disparity in meaning of the magnesium numbers in the test result you were showing. And then the other is, so what do I do if numbers are above optimum? Good question.
Yeah. So if numbers are above optimum, like I said, the only thing you can do when things are way off the chart is try to get this ratio, these base saturation numbers. If you can fix that ratio, that's key, because what you really don't want to do is have, you don't want to have too much calcium, because these ratios will essentially guide the availability of the nutrients that the root system can see. And if the potassium numbers are super low, like I said, the roots aren't going to be able to find. If magnesium levels likewise are super low, you're not going to have, magnesium is super important for green chlorophyll formation and photosynthesis. Calcium likewise is super important for the stability of cell membranes. So cell membranes that are full of calcium, calcium forms lipids in those cell membranes and makes the cell membranes more elastic and resilient. Calcium is also super important. And so this factors into, some of you may have seen a tomato disease called blossom end rot, where the bottom of the tomato fruit where the flower was turns black. That is a calcium deficiency. That means that the able to get enough calcium to the flower and the developing fruit, and the cells at that flower essentially just rot because the cell membranes were just not elastic enough to and resilient enough to grow and expand. So that's when you end up with that black necrotic spot where the flower was. So so that's one of the problems of not having enough calcium. So if you're off the charts, just try to get these ratios corrected. And I'm gonna go down to these soil amendment rates. This is what I tell folks. So these were our organic methodologies. There are two potassium. Well, let's start with the limestone. So if your pHs need to be corrected, you have two choices for limestone. You have high magnesium or high calcium. If you don't need magnesium, then you shouldn't be using a dolomitic limestone. You should be using just a calcium limestone. So this is one of the pieces of information that you'll get from your soil test, is that if you have optimum magnesium levels, don't use a high magnesium limestone. If you need to raise your pH, use a high calcium limestone. For potassium, there are two products that are organic. One is called potassium sulfate. It's no nitrogen, no phosphorus, and it's 50% potassium. So if I put down 10 pounds of potassium sulfate, once again, this is 50%. For every pound of fertilizer I'm putting down half a pound of potassium. So if I put down 10 pounds of potassium sulfate per 1,000 square feet, I'm putting down 5 pounds of actual calcium. So in those soil tests results where they only called for like 2.5 pounds of potassium, I would need to cut this in half. So I'd only need to add 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So if you need magnesium as well as potassium, a really good organic fertilizer is this one up top here. It's called Sulpomag, which is short for sulfate of potassium magnesium. And it is 22% potassium and it's 21% magnesium. So you're going to have to get the same amount of potassium, you're essentially going to have to double the application rate to 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet, essentially twice what this one is down here. And then the other thing you need to keep in mind is that you're going to be getting approximately 20 pounds. You're going to be getting about the same amount of magnesium. So once again, if your soil levels are high in magnesium, don't use sulfomag, use potassium sulfate. And once again, I'm mentioning that your nitrogen tests are not going to come back with a nitrogen reading. It'll come back with a nitrogen recommendation based on the crop that you're growing. And once again, nitrogen depends on the crop. And if you go to the UMass, actually, this is all of New England, the New England Vegetable Management Guide has got all of the nitrogen rates for every crop that you could possibly grow. This is actually what vegetable farmers use to dial in their fertilizer recommendations. It's a really great guide because it also talks about diseases and insects, and it talks about organic insecticides that you could use to control certain pests. And then just lastly, regarding nitrogen, every 1% of organic matter contains, as it's breaking down over the course of over the growing season, every 1% contains about 20 to 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So if you've got 5% organic matter, and most community gardens have actually higher levels than that, you're going to be getting, just from the breakdown of organic matter, you're going to get the release of 100 to 200 pounds per acre of nitrogen, which is usually more than enough for, it's definitely more than enough for lettuce and greens and most crops. So if your organic matter levels are high, and you have a like a kind of like a dark rich soil, like I had a picture of in that first slide, you're going to have enough nitrogen coming from the breakdown of organic matter over the course of the growing season that you may not even have to add any extra nitrogen. So so that's kind of like the quick and dirty guide to soil fertility. And I'm not even talking about adding organic amendments like compost, and adding compost is always a great thing, especially if your low phosphorus compost is the best, because like I said, I'm going to go back up to the soil test again. Most gardeners are going to be, like most community gardens are going to be something like this, where everything is off the charts except potassium and so soils like this really just, if you can find a low phosphorus compost that is derived from like leaf mulch or something like that, yard waste, that is your best. And also mulching during the growing season with compost or any type of straw or grass clippings. That is also a great way to provide fertility that's going to break down over the course of the season and feed the life in the soil. So I guess I'll stop there, Michelle, and ask if there are any more questions.
Yeah, I know that was a bit of a whirlwind to everyone. We asked Tom to explain a rather large topic in 30 minutes. But we don't have any other work.
We need to encourage everyone to come back and take the mug class.
Exactly. This is just a
this
tape.
winter.
Oh, here we have a question. For years, I added well composted manure each fall, but then my test read too high in organic matter. That was confusing because I thought you could never have too much. How can I better
Right.
understand that?
Right. The best way to increase your organic matter in that case is to rather than adding dead organic matter, maybe you should consider adding living organic matter, like adding cover crops into a vegetable rotation is a great way to capture nutrients that are left over from the season, and to also keep something growing in your soil over the course of the winter. You know, I wish I had included a picture of my garden with cover crops. I forgot to.
I might be able to find one from one of your mug presentations, Tom.
Yeah, if you cover crops are what you plant in September and October, and there are plants like rye. They're grains. Rye and wheat are usually planted. Winter wheat and winter rye are planted in September and October, and they grow pretty much into December in Boston. They will keep growing, and the root systems will keep scavenging nutrients, and the plants will actually be photosynthesizing and capturing carbon from the atmosphere and pumping that carbon into the soil, and feeding the biology well into, like I said, well into December, and sometimes all the way through the winter. As long as the soil temperatures are 40 degrees, they will continue growing. So so once again, soil temperatures now are in the 50s. Cover crops started growing. I'm actually in Vermont. Cover crops started growing here in Vermont. You know, a couple of weeks ago, things started greening up. So in Boston, it's even sooner. So that's how you add organic matter without adding organic matter from a bag or dead organic matter. Compost is essentially dead organic matter. It's been bioprocessed by bacteria and fungi, and it doesn't have an awful lot of soluble carbon left in it, because the soluble carbon is what is the easiest for bacteria and fungi to consume. So, but soluble carbon that's coming out of the root systems of living plants, cover crops, that's how you increase organic matter, and you increase the living biomass in your soil without, like I said, without adding bagged compost or anything like that. And so that question about there is no such thing as too much organic matter, that is spot on. There is no such thing as too much organic matter. The question is, are there too many nutrients in that organic matter that are throwing your nutrient balance out of whack? So, you know, the one thing that people don't really think about is that once phosphorus gets too high, then it can start impacting, you know, the availability of some of your micronutrients. So it hasn't really messed up this soil's micronutrients, because more than likely the organic matter level in this soil is relatively high. And the only reason I say that is because this number is over 25. And let me go down to that. This soil down here, you can see is 12. Remember I told you this soil came from Cape Cod? Well, Cape Cod is essentially a big sandbar, right? It's a big pile of sand that doesn't have a lot of clay. It doesn't have a lot of silt. So it requires a lot of organic matter to provide these negative exchange sites. And you can see even with, so these negatively charged surfaces on clay and organic matter are what, this is what these positively charged nutrients are stuck to. As I mentioned, Cape Cod is a great example of New England soils that have clay in them. It's essentially all sand. So all of this negatively charged area is predominantly organic matter on Cape Cod. And that's why this number is, this one's high. This one actually came, I believe this one came from community garden in Somerville. So once again, there's no organic matter level here, number here. So I really can't say from a, I can't say definitively that this is coming solely from organic matter, but I'm betting that this high number is coming from organic matter. Whereas I know this low number here, I know would be even lower if it were not for the high organic matter levels, because this is coming from Cape Cod, where it's essentially a pile of sand. So more organic matter is always better, and especially in a situation where you have sandy soil. Organic matter is going to be your primary way of holding nutrients. And the other great thing about organic matter is that in addition to being the home for all the soil bacteria and fungi, which, like I said, are the life of your soil, the organic matter, the higher the organic matter, the better your water holding capacity. And water holding capacity in the middle of a hot, dry summer is huge. So if you keep the soil covered and you have high organic matter levels, you're going to have to water a lot less, and you're just going to have more fun gardening. So does that answer that question on too much or not enough organic matter? Sorry, I went into my cover crop litany,
it's good.
which
I know you love to talk about cover crops.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no. No, but it's the one thing that I wanted to just caution people is that cover crops, if you can't kill them, they can get away from you. So just be, if you've seen winter rye or winter wheat, I would caution you to start small.
Indeed. I'm trying to get these pictures. Sorry, I'm just having some screen sharing issues, but where did they go? Oh, here we go. Okay. So can folks see that? I'm not sure what I'm sharing right now.
Yeah, so that's a great picture. That was actually from my community garden on Cummins Highway. That was winter rye after, I think I planted it probably in October. And this was probably in November or December when I actually stuck the fork in the ground. And you can see how deep those roots had gotten. They had gone down like a couple inches already. And the worms love this stuff. I mean, this is all green leaf material pumping carbon into the soil, and that carbon leaks out and it feeds the bacteria and so the one thing you have, like I said, you need to be able to kill this in the spring. So you can either flip it over early in the spring. It's actually a little bit of a, so that's,
Where is it? I know you have
actually,
there somewhere of occultation.
I think it might be at the very, very beginning. If you scroll all the way to the
Oh,
top.
I have this occultation picture.
Oh yeah. Tarping is a
Tarping.
great way of killing cover crops too.
Oh, what were you trying to show?
There was a picture actually in my, these are mostly commercial vegetable operations. But if you go to the very first slide, I think, or the first, there's a picture of my community garden where you can see kind of like garlic in the background and cover crops growing.
This may be a different one.
No, I think it may be like, what the hell? Excuse me, Rich.
That's all right. I'll see if I find it, but
No, actually, maybe. Oh, did I take it out?
this is a little different. Oh, this is a cool picture.
This is the one that I did this past. There's a really good picture.
Lovely.
So mulching your aisles with either wood chips or straw. This is a great way of reducing compaction and also keeping the soil cool. There was a slide that Michelle went by that showed soil temperatures of like under black plastic and under mulch and bare soil. And it's kind of amazing how hot soils can get when they're left exposed in the summertime. Soils that are mulched are usually 20 to 30 degrees cooler. And they are better for the root systems. They allow the systems to not shut down. Once temperatures get over 100 degrees, biological activity pretty much stops for plant root growth. And once it gets over 120, pretty much everything stops. You know, it's almost like you're cooking the bacteria and the fungi like you would in a compost pile. So that the importance of keeping the soil covered and cool, it conserves moisture, but it also really helps the health of the root systems. And like I said, it reduces compaction, and those organic mulches break down. Wood chips are the best because hardwood wood chips, and every other year I will flag down an arborist if they've got a truck full of wood chips, and preferably it's coming from either like a maple tree or an oak tree. I just have them dump everything, leaves and all, branches. If you can get leaves, it's even better, because the nutrients in those small branches, that's where all the tree nutrients are. That's where all the leaves come out of, right? And the hardwood wood chips just make the greatest mulch. It provides the best stability for paths, and the worms just go nuts in those wood chip paths. They love eating that wood as it breaks down. So, any other questions, Michelle? Have I gone? Have I gone? Have I gone?
You're fine.
over the line?
Well, I mean, it was very short, so it's fine. Folks are still here.
Okay.
So if anyone has questions, feel free to ask them. And then, we can wrap up in a few minutes. I just want to echo Tom's. I've used wood chips in my pathways in my raised beds at home and in my perennial gardens. And I get them all from whenever I see, well, the tree guy's my buddy now in Medford, so he just comes by when he has nice hardwood chips and asks me if I need
there
any.
you go.
But I just ran up to him one day and said, "Hey, can you drop those over here?" That's the best way. I think it's even better than chip drop or whatever. Then you can
Yep.
see what you're getting, and you can be ready for it.
Exactly.
And
And be
yeah,
selective too. It's like, don't take any pine or hemlock. Go for the hardwood, go for maple, go for oak, go for honey locust if you can. Those hardwood chips really, with the leaves, it's amazing. Those things, like when I get a pile dumped in my driveway, the leaves start heating up and they'll get to like 130 degrees, 140 degrees. But it's amazing, like after 2 years, those wood chips are gone. Like I put them everywhere in my yard. I put them under my rhododendrons. I put them around all the trees. All of our paths are wood chipped, and they slowly break down as the worms and everything else, all the other biological activity, break them down.
yeah, they're wonderful. And also, who doesn't need less weeding? So that's great.
Exactly. Exactly.
And less watering, and yeah,
Yep.
wonderful. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I guess we can wrap up. That was just a small taste of what you get if you take the Master Urban Gardener class. So thanks so much, Tom. I really appreciate
You're
it.
very welcome. And please share my email address if you want, Michelle.
Absolutely,
If anyone's
yeah.
interested, I'd be happy to answer any questions offline.
Okay, great. I will put that in the chat, everyone, if you wait a second. I'm just going to copy it. And then awesome. I hope you can make it to our later workshops, everybody. They start at 1, and they'll also, this is going to be recorded, and I will put Tom's slides, and everything will go into a folder. And if you registered, you'll get a link next week. And if you don't see it, look in your spam because it probably went there.
All right.
In the chat before folks sign off, but thank you so much, Tom.
Happy gardening, everyone.